Changes, turn and face the horde. Changes, don't wanna be a gold farmer. Changes, turn and face the horde. Changes, they're gonna make a different game. Blizz may change me, but I can change Blizz. Welcome, everyone, to the 5th episode of the Vanilla Azeroth podcast. And today, we have a fun topic. Isn't it nice to talk about fun things in Vanilla WoW? We're going to go back before there was any changes to the game, and we're going to talk about fun abilities for each of the classes. We're going to talk about what makes each class fun, because it is firmly my belief that when you pick a class, when you pick a character to play in World of Warcraft, you have to pick something that is fun, that you enjoy. Alright, and so the first group that we're going to talk about today, because they're my homeboys, are the Horde. We're going to talk about the Sons of Durotar. We're going to talk about Thrall's homeboys. We're going to talk about Cairn's people. Alright, so, talking about the Horde, when you pick a Horde character, what are you kind of buying into in the first place? Well, the Horde lore and fantasy, I mean, if you want to really deep dive into lore, you can find other YouTube videos, but the basis of the Horde, right? They're this sort of redeemed people. They're a people that they fell, like the orcs fell into the blood rage and the demons and drinking Manaroth's DNA and all that stuff. But the point is now that they're about honor. They're about making their own way, being working men in this world, and so it's it's kind of a neat self-made man narrative of the Horde. You know, they're the tough guys, but they're also the ugly guys. They're the guys that everyone else thinks are freaks. They're not the norm, right? The Horde isn't gathered around the Church of the Light. They have their own shamanistic traditions, and they're gathered around, you know, their culture and their totems and their sacred nature. You know, the Horde is all the tropes of like Native Americans and also kind of African religion and all of that, all of the stuff that those like stuffy 19th century academics would have called primitive. That's the Horde, and so it's kind of fun. It's like essentially if you're playing like a game of Cowboys and Indians, which you're probably not even allowed to say that anymore. Basically, the Horde are like the Indians. They're like the other guys, and so the Horde are fun, and each faction in Vanilla is so colored by their one unique class. It's really funny, but like that makes a huge difference in Vanilla. That gives a huge difference in flavor, right? And so you have the shamans on or the shamans, as our friends across the pond say, on the Horde side, and then you have the Paladins on the Alliance side. And of course, we know this, and the Paladins are really a defensive class, and it's been said before, but it's very true. You know, what the Paladins excel at is survivability, is living long. All of the Paladin's strength comes from its defense. And the Shaman is kind of the opposite. The Shaman, at times, can almost be a glass cannon. I mean, they're not like a mage. But they're tough, they're offensive. Shaman have this crazy amount of burst, and people don't talk about it enough, but shamans have a ton of burst. If you're looking at, even in terms of spell damage, I was looking at, you know, just similarly geared playing a warlock and a shaman. A warlock, you know, they can be critting for, just the other day, to use anecdotal evidence, on this one server, I was using a warlock, and he was critting for like 1350 with his shadow bolts and stuff like that, and that was fine. But, you know, you have to wait all that time for casts, and you don't really have any instant casts as a warlock. But then I was amazed. I went in and started playing a A shaman, similarly geared, not at the top at all, but his chain lightnings were critting for like 1300 and going on to hit 2 other targets, and then his frost shock was critting for like 1300, and he could have a guaranteed crit with elemental mastery for that. So a shaman, like, everyone is so snowed by just what happens in raiding. And again, I'm not trying to just rag on raiding, but when it colors every other aspect of the game, then you're looking at it disproportionately. But I mean, yes, you're not going to bring an elemental shaman because they don't have that long-standing stamina. They can't hold out in a fight like others with mana. But I mean, in PvP, you can just get stomped by a shaman, right? Like, an elemental shaman has so much burst. They can do so much so quick to drop you, and burst is super important in PvP. So again, they have their own strength, but they're a very offensive class, and so the entire horde is colored by this sense of offense, and even the lore and a lot of the way that things are framed in quest text and stuff like that. It's always like the Alliance is defending their lands from like these invaders, blah blah blah, like these Mongol group or whatever, horde. But it's interesting, even in that narrative, the Horde are offensive, right? They're the ones going out and doing this. They're the ones actually on the move. So if you like that part of a narrative, you like that idea of being aggressive and being on the front lines, that's really the Horde class or faction narrative. Anyway, so digging into what makes a character fun, today I want to talk about specifically the Shaman. The Shaman is a really cool class for several reasons. One of the first reasons the Shaman is a cool class is you can have 3 different races for the Shaman. Now, that's a big deal. Anyone who thinks that which race you choose to play in Vanilla isn't a big deal hasn't played a lot of Vanilla, because despite what people say, it actually is a big deal. I mean, just think of the Tauren. You get another CC just in Warstomp. I mean, Warstomp is so overpowered. Like, it's incredible. It's really good. If you're playing as an orc and you're doing PvP, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Orcs are amazing for their stun resistance, and even like axe proficiency and stuff like that will help you. Orcs are great too. Trolls are there, yeah. Some people like to play trolls. I used to play a troll. I used to main a troll, actually, but can't really think of anything in particular that would help you a whole lot for them with regard to a shaman. But still, like, if you want to be the one with that orange raptor mount, like, power to you, play a troll. Because that's going to be a lot of fun. The things that you have to consider in Vanilla are, what are the big fun moments as you're playing through the game? Getting your mount is a huge big fun moment. If you're like, bro, whatever, I'll just pick whatever mount I want, I don't really care. You're probably just trying to rush through the game at a crazy speed, and you're not really enjoying what's going on. So, I mean, by all means, I didn't pick Tauren not because I have anything against playing cow people. I like the Tauren. But one of the reasons I don't play Tauren is I hate the Kodos. I don't want to ride a Kodo. And so when you're picking one of those classes for Shaman, pick something that you're going to have fun, something that you want to watch the whole time. If you just think like your character is so friggin' ugly the whole time, then you're probably not going to enjoy playing it. It's not going to be a big moment when you get your armor upgrades, because you're just going to hate how they look on you, right? So you have to have some consideration of those things. I'm not saying like just play in an RP set the whole time or anything like that. Of course not. Of course you're going to have silly looking outfits because it's Vanilla. That's part of the playing. But, I mean, at the same time, it's like, just don't pick something you're going to hate completely. Like, that's silly. So, anyway, so what makes the Shaman fun? Well, I mean, the Shaman has a lot of different skills and a lot of different, like, they have a crazy toolkit in terms of what they have. Most classes, they'll only have a couple abilities that you're really using, right? Like, if you're playing a Paladin, you're putting up your seals, you're judging, you're Hammer of Justicing, like, you're stunning every once in a while and stuff like like that. But for the most part, you're like auto-attacking. That's how you're killing stuff. As a shaman, you actually have a lot of different options as you're playing. You have different play styles. So if you really want to be like this melee warrior, like this sort of buffed warrior, you can do that. You can go enhance, and you can use Storm Strike eventually, and even just like Wind Fury procs. It's a hell of a lot of fun playing and getting Wind Fury procs, because you're sitting there, especially like in the precarious nature of playing vanilla, where you're not sure if you're gonna live, right? So like fighting, and your health's going down and down and down, and you're looking at that health potion that you've been saving for a full level now, and do I really need to use this to live? And then all of a sudden, you just see these numbers fly up, and bam, you have this Wind Fury proc, and it's amazing. It just, and people feel like they're hacking when they use Wind Fury. Like, Wind Fury is amazing. When you see someone's health just drop that quickly, it's just overwhelming. Like, it's such a good feeling. Of course, most of the time when you're fighting, you're just gonna have to whittle away, or you're gonna have to use those cooldowns. You know, you're blowing your frost shock and stuff like that, or you have to drop an earthbind and run away and heal up a bit before you finish them off. But those moments with Wind Fury are just so much fun. And people in your group, like if you're playing in a group, and then you get, a Wind Fury proc, people are going to be like, whoa, that's amazing. Like, that's so cool that, you got that. And so it will make you feel cool in that aspect too, just having people watch you put those huge dents into people. Another spec that's totally criminally underrated for Shaman, my favorite Shaman spec actually, is Elemental. Elemental is so good. And people are just like, well, you can't raid with it. Well, yeah, that's true, but it's an amazing spec. Like, it does things that other specs don't do and other classes don't do. So when you're playing Elemental, I mean, as you're playing through the game, it's a lot of fun. You can kite stuff with Frost Shock and Earthbind, and just hit it with Lightning Bolts. And Lightning Bolt is a great spell. I love it. It's a fun spell. It's decent for damage. Like, and the shocks are so overpowered. That's another thing I should talk about. Shaman get these shock spells. They're instant cast spells. Instant cast spells are so important in Vanilla WoW, because, I mean, in PvP situations, oftentimes that's like the only thing you're going to get off. Playing a Warlock or a Mage is awesome because you get these huge crits. But like, if you're a major Warlock and a Hunter just shows up and starts opening up on you, you're going to be in a world of trouble, because the amount of interrupt that they get on you just from having those the pushback, like a Hunter's auto attack and a Hunter's pet can push back your spells so far that you get to the point where you basically can't even cast anything. So yes, when that Frostbolt eventually hits the Hunter, if it ever hits the Hunter, it will do a ton of damage, but that ain't going to help you a whole lot, because you're going to be dead by then. But a Shaman, can Frost Shock him to slow him, or more realistically, Earth Shock him and run up close and start meleeing, because even an LE Shaman can do some decent melee damage. Anyway, so instant cast spells are amazing, and so the shock spells are not to be underrated. The shock spells are really, really good in PvP. Of course, in PvE, shock spells are going to be useless to you because they cause a huge amount of threat. But in PvP, threat doesn't matter. So again, it really matters what you want. But I would make the case that, LE Shaman can be one of the best world PvP specs in the game, and for some people that is the game for them. Like, for me, that's one of my highest aspirations, is just doing world PvP, and that's why I'm probably gonna roll either Orc Warlock or an Orc Shaman. Anyway, so those are fun things that the shaman has. They have their lightning spells. Chain lightning is an amazing spell because it doesn't hit just one person, but it can hit 3 people, and that's a huge deal in PvP, especially if, suddenly that rogue shows up after you start ganking someone else and they're behind you and it looks like you're going to die. To have the ability to hit 2 people instead of 1, or even 3 people, I mean, that's incredible. It's a really, really good spell. And even if you have to go into resto spec, even if you're raiding, in resto you get nature swiftness, and you can nature swiftness chain lightning. Like it's amazing. Like you get an instant cast of chain lightning. Like that's a crazy amount of burst that you get. So shamans are super bursty, and they're really fun for that reason. Shaman also have some other fun spells, right? So like shaman get a travel form. They get ghost wolf, and so they can speed up their running around. If you think that speeding up your run time is insignificant, then again, you haven't played Vanilla WoW. As one person said on one of these forums, their dad saw them playing Vanilla and asked, "Is this a running simulator?" Because all they were doing was running. The majority of your time playing Vanilla WoW will be running from one place to the next. So Ghost Wolf is amazing to get. That's one of the reasons I originally ran a Shaman, was just because I was so sick of running slow. Shaman also get this other fun thing called totems. Now, totems are both a fun thing and a crappy thing when it comes to Vanilla WoW, and I'll explain why. First of all, Vanilla WoW, shamans are crappy because of totems are crappy because of totem quests. Totem quests take forever, even if you've done them a million times like I have. It's still just one of those hassles if you're running here and there, and you're running to places that you haven't had your flight path for, and you're friggin' behind the sepulcher and doing all this stuff just for it. And it is true, if you don't, like, if you're like, no, I'll just get my totem quests later, that's all well and good until you actually end up in a situation where you're in a dungeon and someone's like, oh, can you drop this? And you're like, yeah, I haven't gone and done the totem quest yet. And then they look at you like you're a scrub. So the totem quests, from a lore perspective, they're fun. Like, doing them the first time, the totem quests were fun. Shaman is, I should mention this before I get into totems too, Shaman is also a really fun class because of the lore. If you think that if you want sort of a class fantasy about Shaman, read some of the Warcraft novels. There's the one where Thrall shows up at, I think it's Durnhold, or like one of the Lordaeron internment camps, and friggin' like uses lightning and he shakes the earth, and it's amazing. Like, you get this amazing image of Thrall, and you're like, oh my goodness, like this is like OG, like cool Thrall before he was changed into whatever he is nowadays in the series. But like, original Thrall was amazing, and so that's like an amazing hero of lore that you get to be. And like the shaman are just these cool things. You get these neat descriptions of them in some of the other Warcraft novels, like talking about their relationship to the elements and like how they get their power, and it's just really cool. So they're like a fun class from a lore perspective. But totems. So the bad part about totems is the class quests. One of the frustrating parts of totems too is that they're bound to groups. So it's frustrating because oftentimes in running around in the world in WoW, you get to the point where someone needs your help and you're running by them, and if you want to help them, sometimes you can drop a totem that will help them, like right if they're getting attacked and they're trying to run away, you can drop that earthbind and it'll slow the person or the mob. But I mean, otherwise it'll actually, does earthbind work if you're not in a group? I'm gonna have to test that out later. But my main point is whether or not it does or doesn't. You get the point where, like, if you drop that totem, if they're fighting someone and you drop Strength of Earth, if they're not in a group with you, it ain't gonna do shit for them. Like, it's not gonna do anything to help them. So you do have to. The shaman is great, but you do have to get those benefits through grouping up, and not everyone wants to group up. People have this weird, like, view of grouping up, or at least they did before private servers, where they like wouldn't group up with you unless you had like a conversation first. It's like I only group up on the third date. But anyway, but if people group up right away, and if they know how cool shamans are, and they get invited to group up with a shaman, hopefully they'll just accept right away and then get those benefits from the totems. So totems are like these really powerful buffs. They're decent buffs. They really are. People always underrate totems, like just constantly underrate totems, and that's because usually I mean the paladin blessings are way better than anything. I mean, the paladins, you can't deny it. I mean, salvation's amazing, that blessing. But totems are great too. I mean, Wind Fury is a great totem. And there's a lot of rogues and warriors who think they're pretty cool. So, I mean, totems are really helpful, and they are underrated because, often in WoW, things that aren't, if it's not the best, then people just underrate it. And, just because something isn't the best doesn't mean that it's useless. Druids aren't the best at anything, and they're amazing. So, I mean, it's just part of the hybrid, ragging on hybrids thing. But anyways, totems can be really good, and if you're a good shaman, you'll be dropping a lot of totems, and totems will be really important to your play style. Totems can do amazing things. You can drop a grounding totem and absorb someone's crazy spell damage, right? Like a warlock can be using soulfire, and suddenly their soulfire gets eaten up by a grounding totem. You can have like Tremor Totem breaking sleep and fear effects and pissing off, a warlock or someone who's hodging someone like a paladin. Very useful totems. Some of them are quite situational, but still, like there's a lot of useful totems. Again, a good shaman, like in certain boss fights and dungeons, will be able to even drop resistance totems. And resistance is important too. Like resistance helps. So anyway, so totems are really fun. Other fun things you can do with totems, you can drop Earthbind and you can kite stuff. You can kite for like forever if you're good with Earthbind. Earthbind's a super powerful totem to use. So totems are really fun if you use them well and you know how to use them. It's a really neat part of the game. So a shaman have all of those things at their disposal. I do need to talk about resto because that is a big part of the game. So if you are raiding, you will be resto. And if you're playing resto, again, there's still fun stuff you can do even as a resto shaman. You get nature swiftness, just making a spell an instant cast, and you can have an instant class. An instant cast heal that's going to do a lot, or you can also like instant cast a lightning bolt or chain lightning and get some burst if someone's trying to gank you. So I mean, you get that fun stuff. You get mana tide totem, which is cool. You get some neat like healing proc things that increase armor, and that's fun to see those things pop up on people. Another really fun thing that you get from being a shaman and the sort of healing group is you get repop. I don't even remember what it's called. I think it's called like resurrection or something, the spell, but we always just called it repop on my server, which is if you have Ankh, then you have a shaman has the ability like a warlock's soulstone. They can just pop up again with a certain amount of health. So if you're world PvPing someone and they kill you, but they're so close to the end, you can repop and like frost shock them and just kill them. Like it's really annoying because it's like a shaman has like 1.5 lives because of that, and so like a lot of people get annoyed by it. But it's cool. Like it's one of the neat things that you get with a shaman, and it's one of the fun things you get. And it's going to be really useful to you if you're playing and you get to the point where your group wipes in a dungeon. Even if you're just DPSing in a dungeon, you can still be the one to repop and then resurrect people. That's huge in Vanilla WoW. The ability to save from a wipe like that, I mean, that's a big friggin' deal. And it's not emphasized enough, because when you're running everywhere to an instance, people get really annoyed. Like they'll sometimes it depends on the group, but sometimes like a group would probably even prefer to have a shaman healing than a priest, because if you wipe, everyone still has to run back to the instance. Whereas if a shaman is healing, it's like, okay, once they wipe, then the tank can just go out for his smoke break and come back, and he's already there healed up, because the shaman can just repop and he doesn't have to run. I mean, I guess with a priest, they'd probably just make the priest run and do it anyway. But what I'm saying is it's faster, and so anything that makes the game faster in vanilla is a big deal, because it's a slow game, and quality of life where it exists is heavily valued, and shaman bring that quality of life in popping up again and resurrecting. As long as they have their Ankh, they always have to make sure they have their Ankh with them. Other things that are cool about the shaman, so they're like a hybrid class, which again, people talk about the hybrid tax, but they also don't talk about like hybrid strength. So the fact that you could have a shaman in PvP that is split spec between elemental and enhancement means that you can actually have a shaman who does both types of damage, right? Like they can do melee damage, and then when the other person fighting them thinks they're so clever and smart by running away from them, the shaman can just end up casting chain lightning on them and actually doing decent damage. Like the shaman is not limited in the same way that other classes are limited, because they're both a melee and a casting class. They can do both at once. So it's pretty neat, like playing a shaman and having those abilities to do both. Because like everything normally has like a hard 1-to-1 counter in vanilla, playing a hybrid class then makes it really fun, because you don't always have a counter, and it's it can also suck. One of the weak points of shamans that make them not as fun is they don't have any like gap closing abilities unless they go into engineering stuff. So I mean, yeah, they can be kited for a long time. So if you are the enhancement shaman and you think you're so cool with your two-hander and Wind Fury, and you are cool, but then you get that hunter who's just kiting you from infinity distance away, yeah, that can be really annoying, and you can die from that. But today I just wanted to talk about the fun parts of Shaman. Those are fun parts of Shaman. Last part for Resto is Chain Heal. Chain Heal is like probably the only smart heal in the game. It's an amazing heal, and you can just dominate with Chain Heal. It makes life so easy for healing, and Chain Heal's just super OP. And so again, it makes you very useful in raids. All right, there's other fun stuff I could talk about with Shaman. I love this class. That was one of my main classes in Vanilla WoW, but I've already gone on for 27 minutes, so I gotta cut it down now. Thanks for listening, and if you have any ideas or you want to give some feedback, feel free to leave a comment or email me at fruitopiasj@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Bye.